can I say something crazy? I don't think that planning a Disney vacation has to be that complicated. I know, that goes against pretty much everything you've heard ever about planning a Walt Disney World vacation, but I really think that is true. And that is ultimately why we're here today. So welcome back to the channel, welcome to EPCOT. I'm glad you're here, especially for today's discussion, which is another one in our series of discussions where we're talking about the nitty-gritty, the often glossed over, and sometimes forgot about elements of planning a vacation. Of course, here on the channel, we've been starting at the beginning. We talked a little bit about what Walt Disney World is, but before we really dive into the planning aspects, I want to talk about this because I know that there are a lot of you out there who are thinking, I don't even know if I could do this. It's so complex, there's so much to it, you're probably feeling overwhelmed, and that's why we're here. We're here to help you not feel that way. So let's wander around, enjoy the day, and talk about this. Now, like I said, when most people think about planning a Disney vacation, they think about how incredibly intense the planning process is. And while that can be true for some people, it doesn't have to be the case for everybody. Just like any other travel to any other place, anywhere else in the country or the world, planning a Disney trip is going to require a few things. A little bit of research, it's going to require some planning, especially if you want to make the most of your trip, and it's going to require that you take some things into consideration that you might not necessarily have been thinking about. Maybe things like rules or weather, just basic stuff. And while this can absolutely be a lot for some people, especially for some people who have never traveled before, it's no more planning or research than you're capable of. And I'm absolutely sure of that. But the reality of the situation is that there are a lot of people who will overinflate how difficult it is to plan a Disney vacation for any number of reasons. Sometimes it's just that it's their first time planning a big trip or a vacation and it was a lot for them. And so they communicate about it in that way. Sometimes they're just repeating the things that they've heard over and over again, those things usually being how crazy difficult it is to plan a Disney trip. And sometimes it's in their best interest to make things sound harder than they are in the interest of selling some sort of vacation planning product. We see this all the time. And this isn't just true for Disney. We see this for vacation destinations all over the world. People talk about how challenging the vacation planning process is so that you feel the need to purchase the products that they're selling, whether it's a guide or a service. For example, a travel agent or a tour guide. And while there is nothing wrong with using those services or products, which I want to be clear about because there's always someone who says, oh, you just don't like travel agents, tour guides, whatever. No, I'm just calling it like I see it. Sometimes the advertising for those products can make things seem overly complex. And that can be really intimidating, especially for people who haven't done this before, who don't have the money for those products or aren't interested in using those services for whatever reason. So I think that that's important to keep in mind when you're floating around the internet looking for information. It's also important to keep in mind that because Disney World is such a big place with so much to do, there's a lot of information out there, and lots of information can be overwhelming. So it's important as well to keep in mind that not all of that information applies to everyone, and not all of that information is going to be information that you need to log in your brain space for the vacation planning process. Which, as a side note to this, and yes, we're probably going to have to talk a little bit more about this in depth later, having reasonable expectations is a really important part of the vacation planning process, especially right at the beginning. And we're going to touch more on this a little bit later today, but throughout all of these discussions that we have, you're going to hear me say that a lot. It's not reasonable to expect to come to Walt Disney World and do absolutely everything in one vacation. It's not reasonable to take every little tidbit of information that you hear from people like me and apply it to your family. It's going to apply differently to everyone. So keep that in mind as well as we talk about this, because all of this information, everything that's on the internet, even if you just stick to one resource, which I frankly don't think you should, hear what lots of different people have to say, but it can be a lot. It's a lot of info. So cut yourself a little bit of slack. Don't worry about knowing everything and doing everything, because it's not possible, even for people who know all the information. And that might help you not get so overwhelmed so quickly. Now, all this having been said, one thing that I really want to touch on is something that I hear all the time in comment sections and other videos, and that is that Disney now is just so much more complicated than it ever was before, with all the things that you need to know, whether it's how to use the app, or Genie Plus or different strategies. It's just not like it was 10, 20, 30 years ago to visit the parks, where you could just show up, buy a ticket, and enjoy your day. Now, my stance on this might be a little bit controversial, but this simply isn't true. I know. That sounds crazy, right? A lot of things I'm saying today sound crazy. But the reality of the situation that you won't hear people say all that often is that you absolutely can just show up here at Walt Disney World, go to the ticket counter, buy a ticket, and then enjoy your day. No prior planning required. Of course, this isn't going to be true during certain times of the year, peak season like Christmas, Thanksgiving, stuff like that, but it is possible. It's very much possible, in fact. But it's important to have reasonable expectations about what you'll be able to accomplish during that day. And that's why most people, when giving advice about how to do Disney, don't recommend that you go this route. Because number one, there's a good chance that the park you want to go to will be sold out for the day. And number two, when you don't plan ahead of time, you are at a disadvantage. And chances are you already know this. For example, when you go on vacation, do you book your hotel ahead of time? Or do you head to wherever you're going and find a hotel once you get there? Chances are you book ahead of time, because that's how you're going to ensure that not only do you have the best rates, but you have a place to stay that night. You're not going to have to drive another 2 hours to see if there's availability at the next hotel. You know where you're headed. The same applies to Disney, whether it's hotels or tickets. And you know, the same could be said when it comes to having a good time at Disney without prior planning. You can absolutely have a blast at Walt Disney World if you just show up. But you have to have reasonable expectations. See, I told you I'd be talking about reasonable expectations a lot. Just like if we show up anywhere else without prior planning, there is the possibility that disappointment is going to be there. Unless, of course, you're going with the flow, which is a great way to enjoy a place, especially like Walt Disney World, because there's so much to do and explore here that even if you don't go on any attractions, you can definitely have a day that's worth the price of admission. Now, if that type of casual vacation isn't for you, that's totally fine. It's not going to be for everyone, but there are going to be trade-offs, or rather, there have to be some trade-offs. You either need to do a little bit of planning, or you need to expect that you might not be able to do all the things that you want to do. So that's when it comes down to understanding your own wants and needs and doing your vacation planning or lack thereof in whatever way is going to work best for you and your family in order to fulfill those wants and needs. Got what I'm saying? Now, of course, all of this is to say that different families are going to have different amounts of planning that are required in order to have the trip that they want to have. I don't think that this is news to anybody. And for some people, it's going to be an absolutely outrageous amount of planning that they're going to do in order to have the vacation that they want to have. I mean, for some people, planning Disney vacations is their hobby, you know? And people hobby really hard. But that doesn't mean that you have to. You can do the level of planning that works best for you. And I'm going to tell you something else that you probably won't hear too many people say either. You don't have to do anything here. I know there are a lot of must-do lists, and people say, like, you can't come to Walt Disney World without doing this. Must-dos are a case-by-case basis. If it's something that's interesting to you and you think it's a must-do, totally add it to your list. But if you're not crazy about it, odds are it won't be worth the hype for you, especially if you have to go way out of your way and do a ton of planning in order to do that thing. Which I know might be another controversial take, but it's another one of those things that I think is true, which is why we're talking about it. But I also think that a mile-long list of must-dos is another one of those things that overwhelms people and makes them feel like a certain amount of planning is required when it really isn't. And look, I know so much of this conversation is like so many other conversations that we have when we talk about vacation planning. What's right for you? Is that going to be right for you? Maybe it will, maybe it won't. And I know that that can feel like a non-answer to some people, but it's really at the heart of everything that we're trying to say. There are so many different routes that you can go, so many different options, so many different methods that no one is right. Now, our goal is to try and tell you about as many of those options that are available to you as possible in a way that's simple and easy to digest. It's the goal anyway. And of course, we open up this conversation to you to share your thoughts in the comments down below to hopefully help some other people figure out what works for them as well. But my point that I'm trying to get at here is, while it might seem a little bit wishy-washy and I don't have anything definitive to say, most of the time at least, that's kind of the point. You know, you gotta do what works best for you and not rely on anyone else to tell you what exactly that is. And just like that, we've made our way all the way around World Showcase. And that makes this the perfect time to pull off and have a snack. But before we do, let's wrap up our conversation real quick. Now, we've talked about a lot today. We were kind of here, there, and everywhere with this conversation. But the original question, the reason we're here today, is to talk about whether or not it's really that complicated to plan a Disney vacation. And the long and short of it is no, I don't think it is. Or at very least, it doesn't have to be. Now again, I've told you why I think it doesn't have to be, but I'd love to hear your thoughts either way, whether you agree or disagree, in a comment down below. Also, if you're interested in hearing more about this topic and coming on this adventure with us as we talk about planning Disney vacations throughout this year and beyond, of course, I want to encourage you to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss on any of these discussions. Of course, we do a whole lot more here too, and it's a lot of fun, so you don't want to miss that either, but I'm hoping that this can be a series of discussions that makes it easier for you to travel, makes travel seem much more doable for you, even if you're just coming here to Walt Disney World, because here's a secret. I know I've been dropping a few of these today. Disney World is a great place to start learning how to travel, and then once you get comfortable with this, you'll realize just how possible it is to go elsewhere in the country and the world. So I hope that we can have all those conversations together. Of course, I want to hear what you have to say in the comments down below. Looking forward to reading each and every one of them. Until then, I'm off. I got a peanut butter sandwich with my name on it. I hope you got something good on the menu today. But like I said, yeah, hit those buttons, and I look forward to seeing you in our next adventure. Until then, bye guys.